thing we have to fear is
in war,
fear itself.
there is no substitute for victory.
Let us never negotiate out of fear.
We stand undivided, forever united, fighting hand in hand for the liberty we've earned, for glory and honor, for our sons and daughters, ever mindful of the lessons we've learned. Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome to the intersection of faith and politics. This is WallBuilders Live. Thank you for joining us today, and thanks for joining us on Friday. That means it's good news today, and we're going to walk through several pieces of good news from around the nation. I'm Rick Green here with David Barton and Tim Barton. And guys, I know you're going to pick me up with some positive news from around the nation. What you got for me?
Well, I'm going to start with military stuff. We've talked before. I've got 2 kids in the military, so I'm kind of aware of military stuff, and that is one of the institutions in America that still retains very high confidence in the people. Matter of fact, in the book that we did, U-Turn, with George Barton and I, that was the institution that had the highest confidence of all the institutions in America. That was the one that had the highest confidence in the American people, and people will be glad to know that we have averted what was going to be a really, really difficult situation at Robins Air Force Base in Georgia. All sorts of egregious behavior going on, and fortunately Mikey Weinstein with the Military Religious Freedom Foundation got involved and stopped that egregious behavior. But we had guards. We had these Air Force guys at the front gate. When you go through any military base, they check your ID, etc. And these guys had the audacity to say, "Have a blessed day" to people who went through the gate. And fortunately,
how offensive!
I'm telling you, man, that the world was coming to an end after they started doing that. And fortunately, Mikey got involved and got that stopped. Instantly was able to get that stopped, so that these guys can't say "Have a blessed day," and that stood until enough noise was made that the Air Force reversed itself and said, no, that's "Have a blessed day." And, you know, what does that even mean from the standpoint of forcing religion down somebody's throat? But for Mikey, it was way too much. So Air Force did reverse that, which is...
Well, and this does raise a question for me is, can't any religion have a blessing? So couldn't it be an Islam blessing? Or if you're a humanist, a secular humanist, and life's all about you, couldn't you be the one blessing? So how does saying blessed be inherently Christian that would offend someone so much as saying blessed?
And do not even secular people use the word blessed?
Yeah.
Is it purely a religious term? Is it only associated with Christian? Nuts, but, again, and hopefully at some point in time with a different administration, different Pentagon, Mikey won't have a hotline to the White House to simply protest something and have it stopped before they do investigations or anything else. But we'll see.
Well, and folks that might think that's a small thing on getting something like that overturned, that may not be familiar with the fact that this guy's been able to just wreak havoc within the military for our members of the military that have any kind of a faith. And with picking up the phone, making a phone call, and so getting him overturned is a big deal. I mean, it just shows that you can stand up to these bullies.
The First Amendment gives you double protection for religion because it gives you protection for free exercise and it gives you protection from the government establishing a national denomination. So you get double protection for that, but Mikey thinks that having double protection of that means that you lose your right to free speech if it's religious speech, you lose your right to association if it's religious association, and you lose your right to free expression if it's religious. So he thinks somehow that's a double whammy. Even though you have 3 types of protection of the First Amendment for religious belief, expression, association, Mikey doesn't see that. He sees that as a mandate to get it gone, and that's one of the problems. It's Military Religious Freedom Foundation. They are associates with the Freedom from Religion Foundation. They were just smart enough to not use a negative name when they did it, but they still are an extremely negative group toward religious expression, particularly toward anything that's Judeo-Christian or biblical.
Well, any day that we can say that they got overruled by the military, that's good news on Friday.
That's good, especially with this administration, because way too many things have stood for way too long with this administration, and there's lots of other things going right now. I think we'll be covering some of these, in the next couple of days probably. But even having a chaplain of a SEAL team dismissed because in counseling with someone, he as a chaplain used religious language, and they've now pulled him. We've also got another chaplain that when a sailor was killed, they banned him from saying anything religious to the entire group. Matter of fact, they made him stay away from the base the day of the memorial because they were afraid he might say something comforting about God and faith. I mean, the hostility that's out there. So when you get a reverse like this with this administration in charge, it really is a big deal.
That's a good way to start the day. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more good news. Stay with us here on WallBuilders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. Today, numerous court decisions demonstrate that there's often a conflict between the courts, the law, and religion. Has this conflict always existed? Not according to James Wilson. James Wilson was a signer of both the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. He was a law professor as well as an original justice on the U.S. Supreme Court. James Wilson saw no conflict between religion and the law. In fact, just the contrary. He declared, "Human law must rest its authority ultimately upon the authority of that law which is divine. Far from being rivals or enemies, religion and law are twin sisters, friends, and mutual assistants. Indeed, these two sciences run into each other." In the views of Founding Father James Wilson, religion and good civil law were inseparable.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Thanks for staying with us here on WallBuilders Live. It's Good News Friday. Be sure and visit our websites today as well at wallbuilders.com and wallbuilderslive.com. Rick Green here with David Barton. Tim Barton. Tim, I think you're up. What's first on your list?
I have a national survey, and the survey was really feeling out where people stand on religious freedom, on traditional marriage, and especially since we've seen so many times where private businesses have been forced to change what they believe, or been shut down, or been sued and taken to court over the notion that they don't want to support something that goes against their religious conviction or their religious belief. Well, there was a survey done, and 61% of Americans oppose the Supreme Court forcing marriage redefinition in all 50 states. And that's a big deal because coming up this summer, you have the Supreme Court getting ready to rule on ultimately how we're going to define marriage and what that means for businesses. The survey also discovered, and this to me was the more interesting part, 81% of people said they support freedom of individuals to follow their beliefs about marriage at their work and at their businesses, in their daily lives, and however they want to run their businesses, is what the survey said. So 81% of people, as you look at the scenario we see with, the wedding cake company or the photography company or whatever it is, and they've been forced to shut down and they're facing fines and they've been sued and gone to court, 81% of Americans said no, they should be able to run their business according to their religious beliefs and practices as they see fit, since it is their business. So that's great news that you have the majority of Americans that are saying this is the way it ought to be, and so what we're doing is not right.
And that's not, you said 80-something? What was the percentage?
81%.
Yeah, so not just majority. I mean, that's super majority. Well, David, who was it? Something about 20% are going to disagree all the time?
Yeah. Bobby Kennedy is attributed with having said 20% of the people oppose everything all the time. So if you get 80% in the political world, you're unanimous. But this story ties into something else that's lately been in the news in recent weeks with Indiana and what they've done up there with Mike Pence. They're getting their brains beat in. A denomination has announced it's probably going to leave Indiana because they now practice discrimination. And what they did was exactly what 81% of the people wanted. They passed a law called the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which was passed by Congress federally in 1996. And it says, look, you cannot discriminate against a person because of their religious beliefs. And if their religious beliefs say, I can't make you a wedding cake, but I'll find somebody who can. I can't print you a T-shirt, I'll find somebody who can. They're calling that discrimination, and yet that is what 81% of the nation supports. I've watched the media frenzy up there, and we've had several emails here from listeners saying, hey, they keep saying this is discrimination, but I've read the bill, and kudos to those who took time to read the bill, and they say, I can't find anything on discrimination in there. It's the same as if I went out to a local water tower outside a town and I said, that is a UFO that has just landed. It is a rocket. And the media comes along and reports a rocket has just landed. They don't even investigate to see whether the claim is accurate or not. And that's exactly what they've done with RFRA. They were told, people like Southern Poverty Law Center, who has no clue what religious discrimination is, because they themselves are very bigoted in what they do. They tend to be anti-religious, and so their hate map.
Not tend to be. They are very anti-religious.
And so on their hate map, if you support traditional marriage, you're a hater. Well, we know better than that, and you know, most Americans know better than that.
Well, if you're a Christian,
oh, that's right,
because if you're a Muslim and you murder homosexuals, well,
that's okay.
Fine.
They're not on the hate map.
Yeah,
that's
they're
right.
not against the Muslims that
that's
do
right.
that. I mean, you want to burn a pilot alive? That's fine. That's not hate for a Muslim to do that. But Christians, if we say we believe marriage is one man and one woman, well, then
that would get you on their hate map. That's true. It's a great point, Tim. And that's really what's happened, this media frenzy that's been all over Mike Pence. And Mike is a great guy. We've known him. We've had him on this program on multiple occasions. And it's crazy that the media is jumped in and is pouring gasoline on this controversy, and they're handing the matches out. And nobody's read that bill in the media. Or if they are, they're lying about it.
Which, by the way, it is one of the things we talk about often, a distraction from some of the bigger things that are going on. When you have so many pressing issues right now with you have, first of all, Hillary Clinton and all the things that are happening with Hillary, all the scandals that she wiped her server clean, and then you have Bergdahl and what's going on with him, and Obama trading.
And ISIL and all the stuff
right,
with ISIL.
So much is going on, and so now we have a story that's not even a real issue, but the news media is able to now distract from some of the bigger problems, or what are actually issues, to say, hey, look at this discrimination, which is not actually discrimination, but we want to take your mind off what's going on.
And speaking of the fine, upstanding role models of the Clintons, it wasn't
who was speaking about that?
Yeah, well, you mentioned Hillary Clinton, so
I
was trying to segue too.
I didn't catch the role model part. That
you were thrown off by the fine, upstanding role models. Yes, I know. So wasn't President Clinton? Didn't he sign a RFRA, national RFRA?
He signed the national, and it was bipartisan. Democrats all over the thing.
And the media loves him, and they didn't have a problem with him being for that.
No, they didn't have a problem, and they have not gone back saying Clinton is the one who started this. He's the signed the bill, because what the states are doing is passing the same bill that Clinton signed, except at the state level. It's RFRA, Religious Freedom Restoration Act, passing that same bill at the state level that Clinton signed, and nobody's blaming him for starting this movement of hate across America.
Wow. We got to take a quick break, guys. We'll be right back. We'll get some more good news here on WallBuilders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. Our founding fathers, despite their common love for America, did not always agree with each other in politics. Such was the case between John and Samuel Adams. John was the leader of the Federalist Party, and Samuel was the leader of the Anti-Federalist Party. Consequently, political disagreements were not unusual between these two. On October the 4th, 1790, Sam wrote John and told him, "Let ministers and philosophers, statesmen and patriots unite their endeavors to renovate the age by educating their little boys and girls and leading them in the study and practice of the exalted virtues of the Christian system." 2 weeks later, John wrote back and told Samuel that on this issue they both agreed. While these two prominent founding fathers disagreed on much, they both agreed on the importance of educating the next generation in the principles of Christianity.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us here on Good News Friday on WallBuilders Live. Be sure and visit our website, wallbuilderslive.com. Check out those archives, and you can get some more good news from the past few months. All right, David, what's next on our good news?
Well, I got some good news coming out of Washington, D.C., and I know this is an old story and everybody's heard about it, and it's a big deal that the Republicans have cut the funding for the IRS, and I guess I'm just repeating what everybody already knows, right?
I don't think I've heard that one yet. That has not been reported, at least in anything I've seen.
Oh, you haven't heard that? How the president...
They cut the IRS budget?
Yeah, the president asked for a $1.5 billion increase in IRS funding, and the Republicans not only did not give him that, they cut the budget pretty severely on the IRS side, and the IRS is now complaining that this will be the worst year they've had in years. They won't have enough agents to be able to enforce. And of course, they're now supposed to be enforcing Obamacare as well as our tax dollars, and so they're really devastated over what's happened to them because they don't have the funding that they need to be able to do the stuff. And the Republicans are also now doing the same to the EPA. the Environmental Protection Agency, who has been lording it over the states and communities and sending their regulators and enforcers into Texas and other places, telling them what they can and can't do. And I thought everybody had already heard this news. Had you not heard this news about defunding these major agencies? It looks like they're going to have a whole lot less funds to be able to do some of that. So,
but I thought I keep hearing people say, oh, the Republicans are no different than the Democrats. They do the same thing. This is very good news. They're actually taking bold steps that they used to. Everybody always thought they were afraid of this because remember how they beat up Republicans in the 90s for quote unquote cutting when they weren't even cutting. They were just not increasing by
That's
as
right.
much as.
Yeah, and these are not cuts in the increases. These are cuts in the actual amount.
That's huge.
That's huge. So not only did they not get the increase, they ignored all the increase and actually cut. And the same people who tell us there's no difference are the same ones who don't tell us what they're doing. So they don't tell us that they cut these agencies and are cutting the funding of these agencies, and then they tell us there's no difference between the two. So, take that all stuff with a grain of salt when you hear there's no difference, because there's so much that never gets reported because of the bias of the media that clearly exists. But that's, I would consider to be really good news coming out of Washington, D.C.
Well, it's great news, especially when, honestly, there's been so much frustration over the last few years that it's like, can we make gains anywhere in terms of rolling back the federal government? Well, if you're rolling back the budgets, you're rolling back the federal government. So that is very, very positive, and that's been that's been why a lot of people got involved in the last 6-8 years, was to try to get that budget down and stop stealing from our kids.
Well, the other thing that's been interesting with this that has caused a lot of consternation is the IRS now has SWAT teams. Now, why does the IRS need a SWAT team? I mean, either for health care, some old lady's not going to have health care, so they're going to send a SWAT team in on her, or you're deficient in paying your taxes, and so rather than file a lien, you're going to send a SWAT team in on someone? Why does the IRS need a SWAT team? And so there has been a tendency.
You're going to have SWAT teams to confiscate your TurboTax software.
Yeah, exactly. Unless you're the Secretary of Treasury.
Yeah, unless you're Geithner.
That's right. So what's happened under this administration is you're seeing a rise of SWAT teams and regulatory agencies. And so the EPA has their SWAT team. We saw the Nevada instance of Bundy where the Forestry Service. Why does the Forestry Service need a SWAT team? I mean, give me
Education Department has a
Department
SWAT
of Education. Yeah. What? And so
we're going to make your kid go to school today, and we're going to show up with 10 guys with ARs and the full
that's
uniform.
Right. And you didn't send your kid to school today. You're guilty of truancy, and we're going to. Well, wait a minute. That's a state and local issue anyway. That's not a federal issue for truancy. So all of this has been happening, and part of the pushback we're seeing, for example, in Colorado. In Colorado, they have introduced a measure there to demilitarize the regulatory agencies. They're not demilitarizing police or the National Guard there or the State Guard or anything, but regulatory. And the agency that's screaming to high heaven is the Colorado Department of Revenue. They said, but we have to have guns. Why? We're having to deal with marijuana people. Now, wait a minute. You guys passed marijuana because you said it would make the country safer, that it would drop crime by passing it. And now you're telling us that you need these SWAT teams because, and by the way, you're just collecting taxes anyway. You're auditing and regulating. If you have someone that needs defending, go call a marshal. Go call a sheriff. Go call a police. Go call the State Guard. That's what they do. And so the whole thing that these guys have gone so far in trying to militarize themselves as regulatory agencies, I think is part of the pushback that people are seeing. But the fact that the IRS is also put in charge of Obamacare, and that this administration has shown themselves to be so coercive, even over conscience, whether it be Hobby Lobby or Little Sisters of the Poor, all the others they've gone after to force them to participate, even if they don't want to. The fact that people are seeing now that they're being forced to participate, that they were told that they'd be covered, now they're not covered unless they, all this stuff. And so you're right, Rick, that there is a real rise and a tone change, and we see that with Republicans in the House and Senate, but we're not being told that by any national news media, but there is a lot of good stuff happening.
Well, it's good encouragement for our listeners because, they're often asking, is anything we're doing actually making a difference? Are we seeing tangible results? The answer is absolutely yes. Sometimes it's those small incremental gains, but these are actually big moves. When you're able to roll back the money in Washington, D.C. with federal agencies, that's a huge, huge win that we haven't seen in a long time. Got to take a quick break. We'll come back and get some more good news. Stay with us here on WallBuilders Live.
Have you noticed the vacuum of leadership in America? we're looking around for leaders of principle to step up, and too often, no one is there. God is raising up a generation of young leaders with a passion for impacting the world around them. They're crying out for the mentorship and leadership training they need. Patriot Academy was created to meet that need. Patriot Academy graduates now serve in state capitals around America, in the halls of Congress, in business, in the film industry, in the pulpit, and every area of the culture. They're leading effectively and impacting the world around them. Patriot Academy is now expanding across the nation, and now's your chance to experience this life-changing week that trains champions to change the world. Visit patriotacademy.com for dates and locations. Our core program is still for young leaders 16 to 25 years old, but we also now have a citizen track for adults. So visit the website today to learn more. Help us fill the void of leadership in America. Join us in training champions to change the world at patriotacademy.com.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Thanks for staying with us here on WallBuilders Live. We're bringing you some good news from across the nation. David, what's next on our good news list?
Well, let's take one that kind of talks about this pushback that's happening. And this is kind of just went by and nobody talked about it. Philadelphia. Now, would you say that Pennsylvania is a red state or a blue state?
I'd say that one's slightly blue.
Philadelphia, red or blue?
I'm kidding. Very, very blue, right?
Very, very blue, yeah.
Especially Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. I mean, you got Lancaster and some of the middle Pennsylvania that's very conservative.
Yeah, Harrisburg, all out through there is conservative. We got great Congressman Joe Pitts and others out of Pennsylvania.
Yeah. But overall,
they've got a Democrat governor. They're starting to be a little more Republican. We might say they're a little purple state. They've kind of moved in some Republican directions legislatively and at the federal level. But they're still, when it comes to presidential politics, pretty safe to say they're a pretty safe blue state in Pennsylvania. Now, you mentioned Philadelphia. Do you consider Philadelphia to be red or blue or purple?
I'd say Philadelphia is one of the more liberal parts of Pennsylvania, so definitely blue.
So definitely blue. So please tell me why in northeast Philadelphia, where registered Democrats outnumber Republicans by a margin of 2-1, a Republican just won the state representative race there by 14 points.
I would have to let the crickets chirp here because I have no answer for that. Wow. A Republican wins in northeastern Philadelphia?
And Democrats outnumber registered Republicans 2-1, and she just won the race with a 14-point margin.
Wow. What was the incumbent situation, or was it an open seat? I mean, what happened?
Well, it was an open seat because the incumbent there got elected to Congress, and so to fill that seat, and it's fairly amazing that what has happened is the blue guys there in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia have gone pro-tax, and they are, for example, Democrat Governor Tom Wolf has announced a state budget with the largest increase in spending in 50 years or 45 years. And so here's how he's going. You know how he's going to pay for his increase in spending? This is the new governor, just elected. Any idea how he wants to pay for the spending?
Let's see, this is Philadelphia, so it's not going to be a tax on big gulps.
This is the governor.
So I don't know. Is he following New York's example and taxing big gulps and everything else everything that moves?
Well, you got to know that the state's going to love this because he has now called for a 20% increase in the state income tax and a 10% increase in the state sales tax.
Everybody's going to get hit.
Everybody's going to get hit, and not small. It's not a 1.2% increase, or in Texas we take our sales tax up an eighth of a penny at a time. He's talking a 10% sales tax increase, a 20% state income tax increase. And here you got the mayor of Philadelphia who has announced a 9.3% increase on property taxes. Put all that together, I think some people are going to be spending thousands of dollars in new taxes. I don't think that's what they thought they were getting in the election. And so the first indication of that is that in really, really, really blue Philadelphia, a Republican runs as an anti-tax and gets a 14-point win. What does that tell you about the direction the country's headed right now?
I was just thinking that. I was thinking, okay, so what does this mean for a year and a half from now as we get into the 2016 elections at both the presidential and congressional level? if they're already in Philadelphia saying enough of the Democrats taxing us to death.
Yeah, it means that you better run from taxes. And, the other thing, we did that book U-Turn, George Barton and I, and one of the things we showed is non-sustainability. And what we have is a GDP, and the GDP is the gross domestic product. It's how much your nation puts out every year. And America has 4% of the world's population, but we produce 25% of the world's GDP. So our little 4% puts out so much in economic growth every year. It's unbelievable in the world. But what's called the GDP debt ratio says, all right, what's the national debt? And if you put the full force of the American economy to paying off the debt, how long would it take? And back when Ronald Reagan was elected, the debt he got into, the debt he inherited at that point in time, when he was elected president, it would have taken some 32 years for the full force of the American economy, as prosperous as it is, it would have taken 32 years to pay off the debt. Today, Rick, it's at 107 years. The debt we have right now,
a century.
It'll take 100, and because we have funded all these liabilities in the future with all these entitlements, when your kid and my kid takes control in 2038, the GDP debt ratio will be 190 years. We've enslaved the next 4 generations with debt that they'll have to put all the American economy into spending and pine down. So that's one of the things that you can look for in this next election is people are tired of debt and they're tired of spending. They want people to live within their means.
Well, it's a good thing they're waking up, and we got to put a stop to it now. It's unsustainable for sure, and it's absolutely got to be turned around. Folks, thanks for listening. You've got a lot of good news today, but we've got more for you on our website at wallbuilderslive.com. You've been listening to WallBuilders Live.
We stand undivided forever.